So that brings us quite nicely almost to the time of welcoming our next guest, actually, who I can see is waiting in the wings. So if everybody is happy, we will perhaps bring lovely Emma onto the screen and get ready to have our presentation. There's the lovely Emma. Hello, Emma.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Lovely to see you.
Very nice to see you all. How is everyone?
We are
good.
The girls are very early as you are, and I'm fine.
Good. I was feeling very excited to hear about the idea of the Roaring 20s. I think that's a really nice thing to hear bright and early in the morning.
Exactly.
We'll make a pact maybe for like Monaco next year or something to have a 20 twist to one of our dresses.
20, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Fantastic. So Emma, you've got a fresh presentation for us and some really poignant advice coming in. I know that Maeve wants to say something, but before we start, oh no, sorry, Maeve's got.
Sorry, I was going to quietly leave the screen as you guys were getting started.
Sorry, Maeve.
No, but I'm going to join back in for the Golden Handshakes debate in a little while. But I'm going to say one of the things that Leigh has very much focused on doing is trying to pick up on the big issues that crew are facing. And so I'm delighted that Emma is going to be talking about this, because there has been a lot of discussion in the yacht crew sites and among crew who have got burned by various different financial things. And that's in some ways, whether you're earning loads or little, knowing that your money is safe and what you put away is safe for all future plans is a really big part of the change. So I'm delighted to hear Emma, and we'll be tuning in. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Maeve. We'll see you later. So yes, Emma, let's go straight into what you have to share with our lovely crew today then.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Maeve. Hi, everyone who's either joining via Zoom or listening on Super Yacht Radio. Lovely to see you and be with you again. As Sarah said, I've just prepared a presentation, which I'm now going to open up on my screen for those of you who can see it. One moment, let's just get that open now. Okay, here we go. Hopefully everyone can see that who's on Zoom. So yeah, Tita and Sarah asked me to speak today about investment fraud, because as Maeve said, I think it's quite a hot topic at the moment. And listen, so many people in yachting, well, everybody in yachting is working so jolly hard for their money. And the worst thing is that you trust someone with this hard-earned money and to find out that it is an investment, that it's not what you thought it was, or even worse, that it's not real and it's a scam. So the intention of this presentation is just to go through a list of 10 questions that I think you should ask a potential investment manager or financial advisor before you hire them, just to make sure that you know, or at least to give you the best idea that you can, that they're trusted and that they know what they're doing. So let's run through those 10 questions. And then at the end, I will also just highlight a few tips on how to spot a scam or mis-selling, and just how to slightly, try and help avoid those traps if we can. So for those who are logged in on Zoom, the first question and the first slide is the most detailed, but don't worry, I'll try and simplify it down. So the first question is the company and the investment regulated? And this is important because regulation determines what cover you have if things go wrong. So for example, in the UK, financial advisors and investment managers should be regulated and approved by the Financial Conduct Authority, and they have an online register which you can check to make sure that they are. Incidentally, if anyone is logged in on Zoom, or if you want to go and refer to my presentation later, which I believe will be going up on the Life After Yachting portal as it did last time, I have included all the important links to all the things I'm referring to today. So you can just go right ahead and click through to those at your leisure. And I do suggest, if you're worried about something, that you refer to it, or feel free to get in touch with me either directly or through the Life After Yachting portal, and I can advise you. So going back to regulation, if you use an advisor who is not approved, you won't have access to the protections that are in place. So in the UK, for example, if you're approved by the FCA, you will have access to both the Financial Ombudsman Service and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. So if you have a problem with a company, you feel you haven't been treated fairly, or the investment's not what you thought it was, or indeed you've been invested into a scam, the first protocol is to complain with the company directly. If you feel that you've given them fair warning, ideally in writing, and that they haven't given you a satisfactory response, if the company is regulated, you can escalate this. If the company is not regulated, you can't. So if you're invested in a rather fraudulent scam or something that hasn't gone well, the chances are the company isn't probably going to want to help you. So you must investigate the regulation behind these things. So in the UK, as I say, you have 2 levels of cover. The first is once you've made your complaint to the company, if you're not happy with that, there is a free service called the Financial Ombudsman Service. It's free, as I say, and they advise on all sorts of problems to do with banking, insurance, investments, PPI, loans, mortgages, car finance, all those sorts of things, pensions as well is another really important one. And they overrule what the company says if they disagree. And they can award up to £350,000 if your complaint is upheld. So that's a really important one to know about. The second thing to know about is the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. And they are there in place so that if a bank or building society or an investment firm fails for some reason, goes bust, your investments or cash are protected up to £85,000 per person, per bank, or per investment company. So if you have £85,000 in your bank account and £85,000 in a separate investment manager, the 2 pots will be absolutely safe and backed up by the government, by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. So you can see how important it is to make sure these companies are regulated. And in fairness, all the good ones are. So that is a first red flag if you're selecting a company that is not properly regulated. I will say if you're investing in companies that are not based in the UK, the layers of regulation are less. So you'll have to investigate if you're looking at companies that are non-UK based. Every country is different and every company is different. So you should investigate those individually. And if you do need a bit of help with that, feel free to get in touch with me and I can help you. So moving on to question 2 is you should ask your potential advisor or investment manager, what are your qualifications? And I've put this one in because I've come across a few clients who've moved over from other places who've been unhappy with the service that they've had. And having done a bit of research, it seems there is a huge degree of variance around the qualifications that advisors have in the yachting industry. So I think that's a really important thing that you should just check out to see if the person that you're trusting to invest your hard-earned money actually knows what they're doing and has the qualifications to prove it. So to give you an idea, in the UK, advisors have to be qualified to level 4 or above in a very strict qualifications and credit framework. And that's the equivalent to a first-year university degree. And they also have to obtain an annual statement of professional standing. And these are just really simple things that you can ask them if they have, and you can double check by looking on the FCA website. And again, I've put a link to that in my presentation. For example, at the firm that I work at, Church House Investments, all of our client managers hold the professional level of 6, so 2 levels beyond the basic level, and we're also all chartered members of the Institute for Securities and Investments. So you should just investigate the level of qualifications that your potential advisor or investment manager has. Moving on to the third point, and the third question that you should ask is, what advice do you offer? So the services that firms can offer vary significantly, from meeting very simple needs to holistic financial planning, in which the advisor will consider all of your investment needs and recommend a plan to help you achieve your financial goals over a lifetime. There is a difference between an investment manager and an IFA, independent financial advisor, and the likelihood is in yachting, from what I've seen, you will have come across IFAs predominantly. IFAs are great, and they usually focus predominantly on the financial planning side of things, which of course is really very useful. So they'll help you typically with tax and pension planning and saving planning, etc. Perhaps they'll also help with things like life insurance or mortgages. When it comes to investing, IFAs have to typically, again, there could be exceptions to the rule, but I haven't seen it. But typically, IFAs will have to outsource the investment management side of things because they're not fund managers or investment managers themselves. And the only thing I would say with that, just to watch out for, is that does lead to 2 layers of fees if you go to an IFA, because your investments will be managed by an investment manager, but then overseen by the IFA. So you'll be paying both layers of fees. And I will come on to fees actually later in this presentation. Equally, if you go directly to investment manager, you want to make sure that they can also provide the financial planning side of things that an IFA would. Otherwise, again, you could be subject to the planning fees separate to the management fees. There are firms such as mine, Church House, and we do both sides of things without making an extra charge. So we're fund managers, so we directly manage the money, but we also have the skills to put the financial planning in place, and then you only have that 1 layer of fee to worry about. So moving on to question 4. Slightly whistling through this because there's quite a lot of content to get through, and I'm hoping to have time at the end to have a chat with Maeve and Sarah and Titta. So we'll get on to that. So question 4, I would suggest you ask, is how our relationship will work. So put another way, how much access will you have to your advisor, and how will you be kept up to date with your investments? Will ongoing service be included in your fees, or is there going to be a separate charge levied for every call or meeting held? And again, you can see that is just touching on the fee point there because that is so important. But in terms of the relationship, you want to know things like, can I just ring up an advisor? Will I have a dedicated person, or will I be just going through a call center every time with someone that doesn't know who I am? Am I dealing with someone that knows my personal situation and my goals? Otherwise you can't really give proper advice, can you? The other thing that's really important is the reporting. So will you have online access to your portfolio so you can log in from your phone and just check what's going on if you don't have time to ring up your advisor directly? And will you be able to have access to specific reports around things like performance and your cash transactions and charges, and exactly what you're invested in? I find that a red flag is if there isn't transparency around these things, something is probably trying to be hidden. So you should really ask what transparency there is around those things: performance, asset allocation, cash transactions, and charges. Will you have a dedicated manager who will act as your point of contact? And will they help with your wider planning issues? So question 5 is, do you have any clients in a similar income bracket or position? And what I mean here is that some advisors concentrate on a particular type of individual, either with a specific level of wealth or specific circumstances. But an advisor who has many clients in a similar position to you on their books is likely to understand your situation and goals and may have specific expertise in the types of investments that are suitable for you. So if you're a yachty and you go to a manager that looks after a number of people in the same industry as you, likelihood is they're going to have a better understanding of your tax situation, seafarers earnings deduction, the transient nature of your industry, and that, probably a lack of a pension, all these things that are really important and pretty unique to yachting. Also understanding how busy you are, and if you need to speak to your advisor, it might have to be at 10 at night or 7 in the morning to work around your timings. If you're a novice investor, is there education provided? And I think that's a really important one. And that also goes back to that relationship point, because if you're using a company that simply you're a number on their client list, and you ring up and you go through a call center every time, they're not going to be investing in the education side of things for their clients. They're simply going to be reactive, answering to questions you provide. Whereas I like to think that I and others as well will be proactive in providing education and run seminars and educate you around what you're holding precisely and why and how that aligns to your objectives. You also want to know what support is offered throughout the decision process and thereafter, once you have invested. You want to know things like, can you change your mind? Or what if my circumstances change? Can the investment adapt? That's really important, that flexibility. Or are you locking yourself into something for 20 years which has no flexibility at all? And I think we're going to come on to that a bit later, because there are some horrible examples of that going on at the moment. And yes, as I said, what experience you have of looking after people in my position is another really key one. So question 6 I've just highlighted is, what is your track record? I think this is important. I should also highlight that past performance is not necessarily a guide to future performance, but what it does show you is it evaluates the performance of a fund manager through a complete market cycle. So it helps you as an investor to understand how well or poorly a manager has performed during different market conditions. So in 2008, 2016, early 2020, all these times when the market has fallen, it's good to see how the investment manager has performed, or the financial advisor has performed, to see how they've managed downside protection, and also to see how their performance has reacted when it's going up as well, when the market's going up. Typically, I like to think that if you have strong downside protection when the market is falling, the upside almost takes care of itself, because you're starting from a much more advantageous position. When you're asking for performance records, make sure that you ask for them net of fees, net being once fees are paid, so that you get an idea of the actual returns investors have received over these periods. A lot of people, I find, will provide performance before they've taken away their fees, and that's a rather pointless figure, I think, because obviously fees eat into returns, so you want to know what you're getting after everything. And then another question just around performance is there any third-party verification of performance? Because you want to make sure that, anyone can put their figures on a chart, but you want to make sure that what you're looking at is trustworthy, and that you can look it up and get some backup somewhere to see if it's true. There is a company called STEP, which is a global company. It's the Society of Trustees and Estate Practitioners. All of the lawyers and accountants tend to sign up to STEP, and they use it as a way of monitoring investment progress. So investment managers will submit their performance returns every quarter to STEP, and then STEP will plot them all down together, and you can contact STEP and just see how, for example, Church House is comparing to, I don't know, Barclays, for example, with their investments. So that's a really good one. I've included a link to that in the presentation. I've also, for those of you who can see the presentation or want to go and have a look later, I've, holding myself to account, put a slide up just showing our performance over the last 20 years. We run risk scales from 2 to 8, 8 being the highest, 2 being the lowest, but I've just plotted risk scales 3, 5, and 8 here against the market, so you can see how each of the risk levels has performed in relation to the market. And then on the right, I've just also slotted in that slide about how the market has performed versus cash. So just to give that quick example once again, if you put £10,000 into a cash account 10 years ago, after inflation, that would now be worth £8,424. That's based on an account paying 0.5%, which has been the average interest rate over the last 10 years. But that £10,000, if you put it just into the stock market, so not even with an investment manager who would hope to outperform the market, the stock market 10,000 would now be worth £21,354. So that's quite a stark difference. Then if you look on the line chart on the left-hand side, you can see how each of our risk scales 3, 5, and 8 have then outperformed the market again. So I haven't actually put these percentages on there, but risk scale 3 has averaged just shy of 6% annually over the last 10 years. Risk scale 5 has returned 7.5% annually over the last 10 years. And risk scale 8 has returned just shy of 10% annually over the last 10 years. And currently your cash is probably earning next to zero or even a negative interest rate, which I know some of you have got in your Euro accounts. So that's food for thought. But as I say, you should always ask for performance net of fees, and just make sure that the performance you're being given is true. And you can look on, as I say, on the STEP website. That's quite a good one to refer to. So moving on to question 7, what is your investment philosophy? And this is a more open-ended question, but it might be key to you and an advisor working well together. While an advisor must tailor your investments to your level of risk tolerance, a financial advisor or investment manager who shares your views on ethics, risk, and goal setting might be easier to work with. A key question to ask is about the liquidity of your investments and what access you have should you need to take cash out. You also want to ask what control you have over levels of contributions that you may decide to make into your investment portfolio. In other words, that you're not tied into making high levels of monthly contributions, which you then can't stop should your circumstances change. And again, there have been some really nasty instances of this, which have been highlighted in the press recently. And I think this is what we're going to talk about at the end of this presentation. On this little diagram here, I've just highlighted that for us, key things are capital preservation. So you are looking after what's been put in. You don't want to ever lose that initial capital. You want to protect your investment against inflation, so retaining the real value of your investments. You want a sustainable income, either now or in the future. You want to be as tax efficient as possible. And then for a lot of people, we manage intergenerational wealth transfer. So how to plan to look after your family and minimize tax. And also a lot of people ask us to help them plan for education fee provision. So if they've got children who are going to be at boarding school, for example, if they're going to be, have a long-term career in yachting, or indeed helping out with university fees, or indeed you finish yachting and want to go back into education yourself, and how can we make your investments work for you and take that regular income that can provide for your further education. Other questions that you should check are you a passive or active manager? Now, in the interest of time, I'll make this quite quick, this distinction, but a passive manager invests in line with the market. So something like Nutmeg, for example, who lots of you will have heard of, they will typically charge really low fees because the work involved is, dare I say, lower. So they will stock pick from a market index, for example, the FTSE 100, and they will completely replicate the FTSE 100. So you will just track the market. That is what passive investing is. And whilst the fees are low, you will always slightly underperform the market by that percentage. So a typical fee for a passive investor would be something like 0.45%, but you'll always underperform the market by that amount. An active manager, typically the fees are a bit higher, probably, well, so we charge 1.2%. But the idea of active management is that rather than just simply replicating the market and falling as much as the market falls, you're an active manager. So you're taking the best bits of the market and minimizing the downside and activating the upside. And going back to that fee point, that's why it's really important that when you're looking at past performance, you ask for performance net of fees, because whilst 0.45 sounds much more attractive than paying 1% or something for fees, you want to see how that has worked out in practice. Because if you've paid an extra 1%, but then you've achieved an extra 5% per annum, then it's worth it, isn't it? So that's where that comes into play. Going back to investment philosophy, another key question is, what is your environmental, social and governance policy, your ESG policy? And I know this is something that is often really important to yachties. You're working at sea and you see firsthand the damage that is happening to our environment currently. So it often gives real peace of mind if you are dealing with an advisor that you know is investing in things that are environmentally positive, as well as being socially positive. So that is something, and companies should be able to provide you with a copy of their ESG statement. How liquid are your investments? So we've touched on that. So if I need to get cash out, how long would it take, and is there a charge? And as I said before, do you have control over how much and how often you can add to your portfolio? And is there going to be a charge for that? And also, just again to highlight, can I change my mind? Because you should be able to change your mind. So question 8 is, how do you manage risk? An advisor should explain what they consider your risk profile to be and how each recommendation fits in with this. If you think you're prepared to take more or less risk than your advisor suggests, then ask them to explain how they arrived at your risk profile and whether this should be changed. And remember, if your circumstances change, you should contact your advisor to ensure that your advice continues to suit your needs. Question 9 is costs, and this is a really important one. And just as I say, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into this in so much detail, but do have a look at the presentation on the Life After Yachting portal just to go through all of this when you've got a bit more time. But it is really important to understand what fees and charges you're paying. and I've touched on most of the points, but one of the main things you should ask is, if you are using an IFA in particular, you should check for the costs of the underlying investments, any tax wrapper they might put you in, and then and any fee for their advice on top, because you'll suddenly find typically that you're paying 3 layers of fees, and that you're probably paying a lot more than you thought you might be, and you really do need that transparency to see what you're paying. So I'm just going to flick on to the final question, which is making sure who the custodian and what security of your investments is. This is just to say that if there's that famous investment manager called Bernie Madoff who ran a Ponzi scheme and all the clients lost their money, that wouldn't have happened if they'd had a separate nominee company looking after all the cash. So in other words, if the company goes bust, all of the client cash shall be ring fenced. So the liquidators aren't going to come in and have access to your money. Equally, if one of the clients went rogue, they're not going to have access to other clients' money. So that's the main thing to highlight there. And then just going on to the last couple of slides, again, just a high level view of these, but high return investments, that is a red flag. If investments are offering really high returns and seem to be too good to be true, they probably are. So just make sure you ask those 10 questions before you invest. That will give you a good clue. And high return investments that you should look out for, because essentially make sure you fully understand what you're investing in and the risks associated and the regulatory protections that may apply. Because if you're going to these really high return investments, such as cryptocurrency, peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, land banking, foreign exchange, etc., you've got to be prepared to lose everything, basically. And liquidity we've talked about. And then mis-selling, I just wanted to touch on, because it's different to fraud. Mis-selling means that you were given unsuitable advice. So you are probably invested in a genuine product or investment, but it's just not suitable to you. And your advisor should have taken the time to make sure that you fully understand what you're invested in, that it's key to suiting your needs. And as I say, you can refer to my slides for a bit more information on that. I've also included a slide there on scams. So check that you're not using a clone firm, because often, you'll be contacted by someone claiming to be from Barclays, for example, and they're not. So I've just added a bit of advice on there. And then, yeah, you can be wary of future scams as well. So if you've been got once, you might then be targeted again, because the fraudster will have sold on your details to someone who will then contact you and say, I've heard you've had a scam. Let me help you try and get compensation. And then you can be had again. But in conclusion, and just before we go on to the interview part of this section, because I know I'm slightly in danger of overrunning, I just want to say that the purpose of this presentation has been to explain what to ask and what to look out for when taking financial advice or making investments. And whilst there are people out there who do give bad advice, as there are in any industry, if you can equip yourself to find a trustworthy and cost-effective advisor who can help you manage your finances and investments, there are some really great opportunities to grow your wealth, particularly this year, 2020, when there's so much value to be found. So don't be put off. Realizing these traps is the first step to becoming a successful investor. And as I say, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have any questions around existing investments, or if you're interested in starting your investment journey. But in the interest of time, I'm going to come out of this, stop sharing my presentation, and try and come back to Sarah. So I'm just clicking through, Sarah. So hopefully you can hear me.
I can. That was fantastic.
Great.
Thank you very, very much. That was, I always learn so much from your presentations, and I think we've only skimmed the surface of the value in there. So we will definitely be making sure the full presentation is accessible to everybody, so that they can read each slide individually and learn, refer back to it when needed, because obviously it's early here in England and I may not remember every single
No, quite. Well, I know there was so much in there, and it was really difficult to work out what was less important and what to keep in, but actually it was all really important. So I just thought, if I leave the slides with you, then people have got something to refer back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we discussed, this is a fairly prominent topic at the moment, and there has been some discussion within the industry with some, you know, real examples of crew falling foul to poor advice, poor decisions, and all of the things that you have discussed. And I think that it's so useful to have an expert help us to know how to check where we're going and what we're doing as well. And I would say I know we are running over. We've got lovely Donna from Hill Robinson Elite coming along with us shortly, but I certainly wanted to ask one question, if that's okay with everyone. One of the things from reading some of the online articles recently around this subject was always check everything, like you've said, you know, always make all the checks, always look into the person and the company and the backup and everything around them. But there have been, and certainly outside of yachting as well, there are companies whose perhaps brand name you trust or you've heard of, or other people have had prior experiences with. And I think from what my basic understanding is, check at the time that you are looking to invest, because companies change as well. So you know, companies can evolve, and you may have, you know, seen a brand name over the years or something and think, oh, they must be good because they've been around for years or something like that. But actually, it's really important to check the status of any investment and any company and any person at the time that you invest. Would you agree with that?
That's 100% right. And you're right, at a company level and at an investment level. For example, on an investment level, fund managers change all the time. So you might have heard of a really great fund. I know lots of people like investing in classic car funds and things like that. I was slightly cautious of those, but you know, that might have been having a good run. But then the manager changes. You don't necessarily know that because your friend invested 2 years ago and you go in and then everything has changed. And actually, I had a client who had that happen to him and he had £45,000 in there. He basically didn't hear anything from them, asked me to do a review of his investments. I got hold of them directly. The IFA that was looking after him hadn't even realized that the administrator had stopped acting for them. It had basically stopped trading and he's been unable to get anything out. So that money's gone. It had basically gone pop and no one had told him. So you're exactly right. You just need to do your own research.
Yeah, and I think this, you know, we were talking about peer reviews earlier in the program today, and yes, it's good to take advice from peers, and you know, there's a lot of value in that, but also especially with money, there's nothing like doing your own research, getting and you know, having the reassurance that you've ticked all the right boxes yourself, I think. So
definitely. And your situation might be different to your friends. You might have different risk tolerances. You might be earning different amount of money at different stages in your career. So what's suitable for your mate might be not right for you. But it is reassuring. It definitely is. That's part of the process, is definitely talking to people, what's worked for you, what's worked for you. So don't stop doing that, but don't let that stop you doing your own research too, exactly as you say.
I think for me, in this presentation, the two most important points were the flexibility and the fees.
Yeah.
So as long as you check that the fees and are all included, and you have the account manager and it's flexible enough in your circumstances, so I think those are already very important points. And this is also what we have read in the reports, that people haven't been able to take their money out, or there's nothing left, or something like that happens. So very important points.
Exactly. And I would just say that there is a place for those bonds that are sort of 10 years long, where you have to pay in a fixed amount every month. There is a place for those, but generally speaking, it's not for someone in their 20s in the yachting industry that doesn't know if they're going to have the same job earning the same amount of money in a year's time. It's just not. I mean, I've had clients that have come to me in that position. They've moved to a job ashore, suddenly started paying tax, and they've committed to putting £2,000 a month into this investment for the next 10 years, and they can't even afford to pay their rent. You know, it's that's a sort of a mis-selling thing. Don't be pressured as well. Don't be pressured into selecting something, and speak to different advisors and get different advice and see what works best for you.
That's yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I find reassuring with Church House, who you work for, is you specifically have you have a yachting focus in products. So you have products that are specific for crew, you have products and services. You understand the completely different circumstances that crew have to other people. So I'm not saying only work with a yachting specific, because obviously we're in no way giving people advice here. However, it's reassuring, I think, to have somebody that understands exactly that the likelihood of your circumstances changing within a yachting career is much higher than perhaps somebody that is, you know, working in a land-based career where they perhaps might stay in the same company for 25 years, or, you know, and progress through the, you know, we're much more likely to jump ship, or as you know, to put it in a terrible pun, or jump ashore, as we're discussing at the moment. So yes, I think that for me, I think my learning has come is to ask around, talk to lots of people, get advice, make sure you do all of your checks personally, and yes, like you said, don't be pressured is a really good sort of final point, I think, to live on, because I think we can all kind of worry that we don't quite understand something as in depth as a financial plan, and just sort of be pressured to go with a decision that perhaps we need to step back and take a moment to think about. So
yeah, if you're being harassed into push, you know, I've had clients that have rung up and said, oh, I've gone off him, I've ghosted him because he's been ringing me every single day. Well, that's a red flag. That people shouldn't be pressuring you like that. So take your time, take a step back.
Perfect. Well, thank you ever so much, Emma. Really appreciate your time again today.
Thank you, and sorry, Donna, for the delay.
We'll start welcoming lovely Donna into the fold now to talk about Hill Robinson Elite. And yes, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you, and we will put out on social media when we've got the presentation up and available for everybody else. And thank you again for such valuable advice. We're all going to be listening and taking heed from it, that's for sure.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of morning.
Will do.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.